number of cases, the peak essentially is over in Delhi and Mumbai. But what one needs to be cautious about is MISC in children, and also that there could be more hospitalizations in terms of a fallout of the infection of so many weeks or so.
Okay. Yeah, so we may not see a decline in the hospitalizations and ICUs and deaths for some time. So in that sense, the worst is not over. And while there is no evidence in any of the global data of high amounts of MISC, we will only get to know, in due course of time. What I mean to say is you don't know it until the time for that has passed.
The Indian Council of Medical Research seems to be suggesting that by their own estimates, it's about 3 months or so that they expect the Omicron wave to last. And by that calculation, 11th of March is when they expect the Omicron variant to move towards endemicity. What's your understanding of the situation?
I generally don't like to predict with dates like 11th March, but I will say the following. I think ICMR is absolutely correct that Omicron will become dominant across the entire country in due course of time. In my opinion, it is already dominant when it's nearly 100% in the big metros. It is getting to be 90% plus in the small metros. It will certainly be very high even in tier 2 cities. And for example, in Rajasthan, Lucknow, you can already see it's pretty high. Rural areas are still going to be Delta at this point in time, but they will get replaced maybe another month or so. When it ends is going to be a difficult question to answer for anybody. How do you say wave has ended? You can say the peak would have passed sometime in February, latest. But ending depends upon, all the people who are previously protected, not in connections, so that tail can run longer as well. And when anything becomes endemic is, anybody's guess. Because there were talks about Delta becoming endemic, then Omicron came. It all depends on the next variant as well, right?
So the national peak of the Omicron wave will pass, the national peak will pass by the end of February. That's your estimate?
Before that. Before that. In my opinion, well before that.
So this, are we looking at like some 2 weeks or so? What is that you're looking at? So middle of February?
Yeah, I would say before middle of February, end of January, middle of February, the national peak should be clearly passed. But again, like I said, it depends so much upon testing. See, a national peak in itself doesn't have that much meaning. It's a buildup of multiple peaks occurring at different times in different parts of the country. Some parts test a lot, some parts test a little. A peak occurring in a part of the country that doesn't test doesn't contribute to the national peak at all. So it depends on a bunch of factors. But I certainly think that by the end of February, this entire surge of Omicron that we are seeing around the nation will mostly have been stabilized. And we will be looking at the tail end. And how that tail end will look is not known. How the next variant will come is not known. And
you also did mention that within a month's time, you'll see the surge in rural areas. Also, the infection will be replacing Delta in rural areas. Given that there are vulnerable people who are still dying and the kind of system, the healthcare system that we have in rural areas, do you fear that it's going to at least overwhelm the system in rural India, not so much in urban India, because overall the pressure hasn't been much?
I don't have much fear of that for a very simple reason. Immunity is very high. So if you were to take two simple facts into play, people say Omicron itself is milder than Delta, maybe somewhere between 60 to 80% milder in terms of risks of creating severe disease requiring hospitalization. And then you consider that prior infection or vaccination also gives you 80-90% protection. You add both of these things together and you see that situation is very different from the Delta wave. So number of cases will rise, including in the rural areas. But I see no reason that we will face any kind of problem that we faced in the Delta wave, because that's simply not how this virus is behaving. And we have a huge amount of immunity in India, including what is called hybrid immunity, where people are both infected and vaccinated.
Also, so you mentioned prevalence in metros like Delhi, for example. I want to ask you, like a state like Maharashtra, what's the kind of prevalence that you see? Which is the state which has seen over 90% prevalence?
See, Maharashtra is larger than many countries. So again, if we say Mumbai, it's a connected people, place. Maharashtra will have areas where people rarely travel to cities. So, a state that contains rural areas, backward areas, less connected areas, big metro, big cities, there is no point. Delhi as a state and Maharashtra as a state are two completely different things. So a lot of Maharashtra will still be Delta. The less connected part of Maharashtra will still be Delta. Which is again, why there will be no single peak for Maharashtra. It will be a composite of multiple,
and Mumbai city?
Multiple parts. Mumbai peak is already down. Mumbai.
What's the prevalence of Omicron?
Like I said, pretty much everything is Omicron by now.
Meaning almost 100%?
Yeah, 95% plus.
Okay. Okay. You did mention that Rajasthan, in fact, has touched almost 100% prevalence. That's also correct. Rural Rajasthan as well?
No, I would not know the numbers for rural Rajasthan. The numbers that have come out always come mostly out of cities. But Rajasthan is also pretty high. See, 100 is one of those numbers that can never be fully true. It just takes one case of Delta to disprove 100.
Sure.
So pretty much what I would say is finding a Delta sample is unusual. Now, in Delhi, Mumbai, many parts of UP, many parts of Rajasthan, we don't see Delta when we look at the sequences.